This is a story about two fish that some might consider dirty ditch fish, especially with a name like suckers and chubs. Go ahead. The Baca National Wildlife Refuge is located in the San Luis Valley at the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains near Crestone, Colorado. The area was first established as a land grant in the 1820s, but the land was sought after for many different reasons, such as gold mining, ranching Hereford cattle, oil and gas rights, and water rights. At one point, a runway was even built, and the developer at the time had dreams of creating the next Aspen in the San Luis Valley, but obviously that did not pan out for him. Water, as everyone knows in the West, is one of the most precious resources. Despite the arid appearance today, water was once abundant here because of an aquifer formed by an old lake bottom, which covered most of the valley floor. The people in the valley actually needed to divert water to dry out the area for farming. Wells were also dug everywhere, which dried out the aquifer immensely. In the 1990s, a developer wanted to sell the water rights for the land to the Front Range. But the water users of the valley fought back. They went all the way to Congress, and in 2003, the area became the Baca National Wildlife Refuge to protect wetland areas for migrating birds and other wildlife. A few years later, refuge managers noticed several small fish in the irrigation ditches. They sent some samples to state biologists who were shocked when they realized that some of these fish were Rio Grande suckers, a species that had all but disappeared. This map of the San Luis Valley shows the only remaining indigenous populations of Rio Grande suckers in red. Before discovery at the Baca, they could only be found in one other location in the area. But historically, they occupied most of the water in the valley. The other fish discovered was the Rio Grande chub. Though not as rare as the suckers, their numbers have also declined from historic levels, mainly due to diversions, reservoirs, and competition with non-native species. It is pretty remarkable that these fish managed to survive in irrigation ditches in an area that had been ranched for over 100 years. While most of the streams in the valley dry up in the fall, the ditches on the refuge are supplied by springs which maintain small pools of water year-round. The suckers and chubs found here are genetically unique from the rest of the Rio Grande watershed because they have been geologically isolated by a closed basin. This means that the water that originates in the San Luis Valley stays in the valley and does not flow to the ocean. The water on the refuge is managed to create large wet meadows for bird habitat, but during high runoff, the fish move downstream and out into the flooded fields. As the flows recede, they cannot move back upstream and they become trapped. The refuge had to make some changes to help these rare species. Starting in 2015, the Fish and Wildlife Service and Colorado Parks and Wildlife sampled the two ditches where the fish were found using electrofishing on the left and seining on the right, trap nets, and even snorkeling. Snorkeling was used during high runoff to observe how much of the flooded area the fish occupied. Trap nets have been the most effective and least stressful method of capture for these fish. Part of the sampling process was inserting tracking devices called passive integrated transponders, or PIT tags. These are small electronic tags that are inserted into the body cavity of the fish and have a unique code. Previously tagged fish can be identified with a pit tag reader, which is what the ring you see on the tailgate, and this is used as a mark recapture method. Sampling also helps determine fish health, population, and habitat. Throughout the year, we use antennas and pit tags to track the fish. These antenna arrays detect and record pit tag numbers as tagged fish pass near the ring. By placing the antennas in particular locations, we can understand how fish are moving within the system. For example, if we place antennas upstream and downstream of a culvert, we could determine if fish are able to pass through it or if it is a barrier. If we place them in a lateral ditch that flows into a pasture, we can determine if the fish are being trapped. The Fish and Wildlife Service has replaced several structures that were barriers to fish passage. Here is an example of a culvert that was replaced. Water is also being managed differently on the refuge to benefit the fish as well as the other wildlife. We have deployed over 5,000 pit tags in the system since 2016. We plan to continue sampling and deploying more pit tags to help monitor these species and maintain their populations. So my last question is, why should we care about Rio Grande suckers and chubs? Suckers are state endangered and chubs are listed as state threatened, but they've both been petitioned for federal listing. And if this happens, that would mean greater constraints for management and at a greater cost and expense for taxpayers. But beyond that, native species are all important links to a functioning ecosystem. And in my opinion, a fish that managed to survive in some backwater ditch for 100 years deserves a little bit of our protection.